Yeah, in Perth, hot here today. I'm jumping on for the Come Taste and See workshop, something that I'm really excited about to share with others the heart healing journey that I've experienced, and now I mentor other women on that journey as well. I'm Miriam Smout, founder and creator of Redemption Mamas, a space where mentoring and heart healing has been really sweet to be a part of. I help women heal deep wounds, and especially heart wounds. They're the ones we want to get healing for. Reclaim their personal power and unlock God-given destiny, because I believe inside of every one of us is a very unique, special, beautiful you. And that deserves to be valued, treasured, and loved for who we truly, truly are. So before I start the workshop today, I've invited a guest, Karen Nelson. Karen, well, I won't say how long we've known each other because it seems forever, but let me bring Karen on. Karen, I'll bring you on. This is Karen. Hi, Karen.
Hello.
Karen has been a dear friend for many, many years. I've lost track now. In fact, you've known my husband longer than I've known him.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, look, I was blessed to come into that with many dear friends that he had, you and Stuart being among that group. And over the years, we've done a lot of life, some of it together and a lot of it not together, because life does that, doesn't it? I was taken to a country town marrying Colin, and when I met Karen, you already had a few children, I think. You were a bit ahead of us with the children thing.
Yep.
And I got to watch Karen and managing her children, and I learned a lot from that. And I also watched Karen in her journey and the way that life has framed up for her. So, Karen, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and who you are, and you're jumping back into the space again. So, yeah,
So thanks so much for inviting me to share with you, Miriam. I guess, like going right back, I was the oldest of 7 children, brought up in a home, quite a religious kind of Christian home, but very, very strict home. And being the eldest of 7 children, and Mum and Dad fostered a couple of Aboriginal children as well. It was not such an easy childhood. There were lots of things that went on there, and so my dream was to get married myself, have my own children, and do it really well, do it the proper way. And so and then I went on and I met my husband when I was quite young, and we married young. I was only 20 when I married, and within a short time we started a family. So I now have 4 adult children and 10 grandchildren.
Wow.
So we're busy people, but I guess in between all of that we married and we had these beautiful little children, and I used to look at them and thank God for them when they were younger, because they were just beautiful kids. They were great. And I actually remember a time you came around, Miriam, and my little girl she was only about 2 or 3 then, and she was demanding a banana, and I just said to her, "You have to ask me nicely." And this kind of went on, and she threw the biggest tantrum and was kicking on the door, and I was so embarrassed. I was thinking, oh my gosh, here I am, this good Christian family, we're bringing up their kids well, and this little girl's chucking the biggest tantrum, and you just sat back and said, just do what you have to do. And I actually appreciated your grace and wisdom back then. You didn't have children. I think you were just fairly newly married, but you just let it kind of roll out. And I think you left my house that day, and I felt like, wow, I can teach others even when things are going badly. I can show them. I don't know, you might not even remember that, but to me it was a moment. It was a moment in time.
I actually do remember it very well, and I remember that comes back to me a lot. And the thing that I remembered from it was just win.
Yeah.
Just don't give in.
That's it. I was determined that I was not going to give in to this little girl. And yeah, that little girl now is just turned 40, and she's such a strong woman, and she's an amazing mum herself. And I just think, gosh, these moments that we go through with our kids, we could beat ourselves up for them, or we can pat ourselves on the shoulder and say, I did well. I did okay there. So yeah.
Yeah, mothering demands way more than we have the capacity for. I often used to say to God, I don't know what you were thinking when you thought, oh, just give them children, everything will be absolutely hectic, messy and chaotic for years. But
yeah.
it really does throw you, you can't do it on your own. And so it throws you on the Lord for trust. And so what about your journey with mothering? Like what are some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah. Well, I think when I was when my kids hit their teenage years, I remember talking to our neighbour who was a police officer, and there was a bit of trouble in the neighbourhood. There were kids that were getting involved in using drugs and that kind of thing. And I remember talking to him and saying, I believe that if you bring up the child in a good, loving home and rah-de-rah, give them, you give them the best love that you can give them, that they will not go down that pathway. And he just stood there silently in front of me and said the words after a little bit of time. He said, Karen, that's where you're wrong. He said, I've worked with families, the best families, that children have gone into addictions and that's destroyed the family. And then I've had some of the worst families, the most dysfunctional families, where the kids have grown up to be good, strong citizens. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that was a revelation to me. And then within a short time, we started noticing changes in our eldest son's behaviour. When he was at high school, he was catching a bus and a train to school, and in that time he obviously got involved with some other kids that were using drugs. And we had no idea. We had no training in this. Like, never in my time in a church or in home groups or in marriage retreats, nothing gave us the tools to even understand about addictions. And this being our oldest son, we didn't really have any friends who were going through this. Most of our friends, their kids seemed to be going really well, and ours were not, particularly our eldest son was not going well. And it took us a bit of time, but eventually we realised that he had become involved in using some fairly heavy drugs, and basically our lives changed from that time onwards. We had situation after situation we were facing with him, and his behaviours and his lack of being able to be a part of a family anymore was quite disrupting to our family.
Yeah.
And this went on for years and years, and even to this day, we still haven't really seen a major breakthrough with him, and he's now in his 40s. So it's been a really, really long journey.
Yeah.
But yeah, thrown in that, there was all kinds of things that went on that were, that were difficult. On social media, it's hard to sort of I can't be too specific, but I can tell you that it was a nightmare that we felt that we would never wake up from.
Yeah. So for you, there was like a lot of brokenness in your heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you how did that manifest for you? Like, what were some of the feelings and your emotions that you had to journey through?
I think, for me, I just continually was self-blame, blaming myself for these little moments in time where I knew that I hadn't been a good mum, just moments. And then you know, I'd beat myself up for those and think, you know, I'm to blame. And that was really difficult. And then I think, you know, that started to affect my relationship with my husband. And it started to affect my relationship with the other children as well. They were younger and they, you know, we were trying to protect them from that. But, you know, for me, I felt my heart was just being stomped upon. And it was hard to even see the light of day. I felt, you know, people say you go into that dark tunnel and you know, you see the light and you can follow the light. And I, for a long time, did not see a light. It just felt like one dark situation after another.
Yeah. And addiction just has that capacity to overshadow everything. It's a very dark thing in the life of the person, but in the life of the family as well.
Yeah.
So what sort of, was there a point when you thought, gosh, you know, if I don't do something about my emotions, how I'm feeling, you know, I'm not going to do too well? Was there a point when it really occurred to you that you needed to go on a journey of heart healing?
Yeah, I think in amongst all of that, Miriam, I would just in Mark's, my son's earlier years, I'd been through a journey where I was diagnosed with a malignant ovarian cancer, which was a really rare cancer, and as a result of that cancer, I had numerous surgeries. And I remember one of the surgeries that I had, they used a laparoscope to operate, and then suddenly I started hemorrhaging. So they really had to almost rip me open. They had to cut me open without any kind of thinking about where they were cutting or which nerves to avoid or whatever. But they had to do a very big, deep incision to stop the hemorrhage. And I remember years after that, and even to this day, that scar is still very painful. And then I also had other surgeries where it was obviously taken slower as far as there was an incision, but it was done with the scalpel in a very neat fashion. And I think, you know, what God showed me in all of this, you know, what we were going through with our son, and was like he was able to do surgery on my heart in a way that there were two ways this could happen. There was a way where it could happen, you know, being careful and doing it quite strategically. And God has, you know, that's the thing, that God, he's the amazing surgeon. He's the one that can do these things in our heart. Or, you know, I can leave it to the last minute till things start going wrong, and then it will heal up. My heart will heal, but there's a difference between a tear and a cut that's been strategic. And, you know, the reason I'm telling you this is because I feel like God showed me that he was going to do surgery, and it was going to be neat and painful for a season, but there would be a time where I'd look at that scar and go, oh, what was that all about? Oh, that's right, that's what that was about, rather than every time I touch it, the pain comes back to me, which I've, you know, at the moment physically I've got both. But, you know, God did a work in my heart, and the way he did a work in my heart was just moments that he provided, just little miracles, and sometimes big miracles. And, you know, just, I think, and cutting out of my life my own, my worth in myself was not that good, I don't think. I think I did not value who I was. And I think God was wanting to show me that I am a person of value.
Yeah.
That I'm not a failure as a mum. I'm just doing exactly what, you know, exactly what any other mum would do. Living my life as any other good mum would do.
Yeah.
But the self-blame was eventually going to kill me. And, you know, so much worry about this and worry about that, you know. I'd worry about him when he was home, when he was away from the home, that he was safe. And then when he was home, I would worry that he was in the home, and are we safe? So we had this continual thing going on, but in the midst of that, God did a work in my own heart.
And what did that look like? What do you see has shifted and changed?
Yeah. Well, I'll just share a story. Like probably when things were the worst, and we actually went through. At the same time, my husband lost his job, and we went through losing our home. We lost our car. We lost everything. Our son was still in the midst of this kind of, whatever he was going through, and we had other things happening in the family which were quite difficult. And I remember one day, my sister said to me, Karen, I've been going to this hairdresser, and she's really lovely, and she's, she doesn't charge a lot to do your hair, but she's brilliant. Maybe go along and see her. So I went to the salon where she was working, which was a long, long way from where I lived. I was like, why am I driving all this way to the other side of Perth to get to this hairdresser? But anyway, we just moved into a rental property, and we'd been there for a few days, and so I was just chatting to her, and she was telling me that they had built a new house, and I was like, well, tell me about your house. And so she started telling me about the house, and then I said to her, what colour roof has the house got? And she told me, and I said, which suburb is it in? And she told me, and I said, I think you might be my next door neighbour. And it was just bizarre, like something inside of me just jumped, and I knew this was a God appointment. Anyway, so it was true. They were our neighbours, and they came into our life, a young couple with a little 2-year-old daughter, and we journeyed with them over the next few years, and they became like family, a God family. They came to have a relationship with Jesus themselves. It was just amazing. So on one hand, we had all this that had been going on, and then God provided us with the most beautiful gift, and that was amazing for our other children, for just the way that relationship. And we found our neighbours started gathering in our home. We had these amazing gatherings where, unlike anything I'd ever experienced before, we could gather with people and worship God, and also be really real and authentic, and ask questions. And these guys, our neighbours, had journeyed through some dark stuff, and they'd actually invited us to take a party bus into the middle of Perth, in the nightclub area of Perth, to just to party on and have a celebration for their 30th birthday. And we felt God saying, yes, go along. And during that time, we saw, I guess, the darkness that exists in those places, in those nightclubs.
Yeah.
But we also saw God's light shining through, and it touched our neighbours that night. And they had just such a real experience of the love of God just washing over their lives. And so there were kind of these two things happening, and I knew that everything that happened was God had come to me and given us that gift. It's like healing. That was healing. That was, it was tangible as well. It wasn't something airy-fairy. It was actually something real.
It's an act or a choice that you made, instead of just completely absorbed and focusing on your pain and your struggle, to turn and give to others. And I remember when I was going through a dark time in my own life, my husband actually reached out to some people in the US that we'd connected with, and that was Stuart Briscoe. So he was a well-known guy. He'd come over and stayed with us, and he said to him, what advice would you give to my wife? And he said, he actually asked his wife, and she said, find someone worse off than you and help them.
Yeah.
And so, look, it sounds like that might have been a catalyst for the rest of you, which has been about helping people in those dark places as a chaplain.
So went on from there to you know, kind of accidentally became a chaplain. You know, I was guiding a friend of mine who I thought she would make an amazing chaplain, and they were looking for school chaplains at that time. And so I suggested to her several times, and she said to me, Karen, I'll apply if you apply.
Okay.
And that stumped me because I was like, no way, like I haven't got qualifications. But yeah, I ended up just out of just really not believing that anything could come of that, but I did get accepted as a school chaplain, and my journey, that was 15, 16 years ago. And yeah, since then I've worked with many chaplains, worked in schools and worked right throughout the goldfields and the Esperance area and right throughout Western Australia, actually, the southern part of WA, with chaplains, with families, with individuals, with... So yeah, that for me, it's interesting, you know, you'll sit and you'll hear someone's story and everything inside of me wants to scream out and go, I know, you know, and, you know, all you can do is quietly say, look, I understand, you know, I do have a little bit of understanding, because you do have an understanding. You might not fully understand their situation, but you know the journey that they must be traveling. Or
and without the journey that you've experienced, and the journey that we've all kind of had to confront issues, we wouldn't be any use. We wouldn't be any help.
no.
We'd just be probably critical, judgmental people that what's wrong with you? You know, why has this happened in your life? And I think that's part of our generation. There's been quite a shift where we've been humbled, we've been taken down a peg or two. It's nothing to do with how brilliant we think we might have been as parents, and you know, in that journey, it makes us authentic. It makes us able to relate to those who have such incredible needs. So for you, like heart healing, it sounds like it's helped you really understand a whole lot deeper layers of what life's all about, the challenges, and so what would you sort of say to people who are thinking, you know, I've gone through all of this, I'm just a bad mother, I'm just a bad person, I'm just stuck in this place that, you know, seems impossible to change. What sort of would you encourage them to do?
Yeah, I guess, you know, it's so easy as a parent or as a wife or a mother, you know, to worry about things, you know, worry about, you know, how's this going to go, how's that going to go. And you can sink into a place, you know, into a bit of a black hole when you are continually worrying about the future, or worrying about what's happening, or I don't have control over this situation. I think it's letting go of that control. And even though you know, it's quite normal as a parent, I guess, to have that sense of wanting to control things. But I think letting go of that control is something that you've got to actually make a, you know, tell yourself, you know, we can speak into our own hearts and say, you know, I stopped being a worrier and started being a warrior. So like a warrior with a sword, and not fighting against anyone else, but fighting against myself and my own natural inclination to worry about things. And I think that's when, you know, God started to, he was always there. He was always speaking to my heart, but the worry gets in the way. It gets in the way of what God's wanting to do in your life. And, you know, I think letting God cut through and remove the bits that needed to be removed, remove the cancer that was in my heart, the things that start off quite small and not quite normal, and then can grow into a cancer. And that he was able to remove those things step by step. Nothing ever happens overnight. It's a journey, and quite often you don't even realize God is doing anything until sometimes years later, and you look back and you go, wow, you know, like. And I remember, you know, just reading something that my daughter put on Facebook about how these particular years in her life were just horrible. And then suddenly something happened, and for the next following years, she said, my life just became absolutely amazing. And that was when we moved, and she'd connected with our neighbours really well, and they loved her. And I think here I am thinking, oh, you know, this is destroying my kids. And God had already started to work in their lives as well.
Wow.
She
You
was
had
fine.
to meet your own neighbour to drive over the other side of the city for wow, that's amazing. Is there a point, I mean, did you feel like you had to do this on your own, and was there a point when you went, actually this can't be done on my own?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, just reaching out to other people that, you know, sometimes we're reaching out to, I guess, not being strategic in who you reach out to as well. And, you know, you've been part of that journey for me as well. Just like having someone that you know understands, has had the journey themselves, and understands that, you know, we can get through this together. We can walk through this whole thing together. And I think if you tried to do this on your own, it would destroy you. But walking through it with some wise people, and we don't always get it right. None of us always get it right. But I think walking through this with people who are authentic and people that really care, and it's not difficult to pick those people out. And it's also not difficult to pick out those things that will bring you down, those things that will pull you down. And I think stepping away from those and making decisions that, you know, I'm not going to let this destroy me. And I think getting to the point where you're looking after your own well-being and not feeling guilty about it as well. I think being brought up in a home as a child to believe that you had to really work hard to get God's love to reach you. You had to work and do everything right. And not always, that doesn't always work in real life. You know? So I think getting to the point where you understand that, you know, your own well-being is extremely important to God as well, to look after yourself and not feel selfish.
You
know, I think just reaching out to others, and even just for your own good, not for, you know, not for my son's good or anyone else's, but for my good. And so that, you know, our well-being is so important. I think if we let our own well-being fall away, if we neglect our own hearts, that's when things will really fall apart.
Yeah, that's so true. If you don't look after yourself, you can't look after anyone else.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah, you get to the point where you don't have the capacity to look after others anyway. You know, your health is compromised, and your emotions are all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, thank you. Thanks for sharing so honestly and openly about your own journey, and you know, your journey with addiction in the family. It's just such a disempowering thing, because it's something you got absolutely no, as you say, no control over whatsoever. But yeah, thank you so much, and all the best. You know, as you continue back now, had a break from chaplaincy for now you're back in that, and I know that you're an incredible gift to the schools and the children that you go to. So yeah, God bless.
Thank you so much, Miriam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my dear friend Karen, who we have journeyed together off and on over the years, and that's one of the sweetest things that Karen was talking about, having people to do the journey with. And like Karen mentioned, it can be hard sometimes to pick the right people. But, you know, if you're in a situation where you're not with the right people, disentangling with them is probably a really important step to take, and just finding that, asking God to open up and provide and give you the friendships, the connections that are going to facilitate a heart healing journey for you. So this is what my passion is. My passion is that heart healing journey. My passion is for women and walking alongside of women to see deep wounds in our lives healed. I experienced wounds over my life that what happens is they tend to then become shadows that really sit on your heart and stop you from seeing the truth of who you are, seeing the truth of who you've been created to be. And then not being able to step into your destiny, not being able to step into your true, authentic, genuine self, because we believe all these lies that are just totally not true about ourselves and about the situations that we're in. So I'm going to quickly just grab a little PowerPoint here. This is what I love to share about. I love to share about the heart healing journey. When we have a brokenness inside of us, when there's a brokenness in our heart through many different things that can come, sickness, relational issues, disappointment, all of these things bring wounds on our heart. And when we have those, when those wounds sit there, they really overshadow and block out. They stop us from really being able to see who we truly are. Oops, sorry, I'm at the wrong end of it, so I'm going to spiff my way back again, give you a few heads up on what's happening here. So, oh, look, I tricked myself. So the wounded heart, this is the piece that it took me many years to understand. I really started to think that where I was at and who I was finding myself to be, which was an emotional mess, was just who I was, that I didn't have the capacity to really be anything else than this emotionally wrecked woman and this unraveled person that life circumstances like Karen shared started to happen. But on the journey that I took, which I'm so grateful for, I started to get understanding and insight that what was happening was stuff in my life would cause a wound, or what I say or call is a black spot. A little dark area that starts to block out the light and the life. And things like abuse, emotional, sexual and spiritual abuse, and for me, I experienced all of those. They start to bring wounds on your heart that really overshadow and stop you from seeing who you really are. The relational breakdowns that we experience in parents, siblings, marriages, boyfriend, girlfriend, when those breakdowns happen, it hurts our heart. There's a wound that sits there. Trauma, trauma from natural disasters, from domestic violence, from relational trauma, all of these things end up being wounds that sit on our heart. Loss, losing a husband, a spouse, a partner, a friend, a child. These are heart wounds that without healing end up just being black spots, dark areas that we never overcome. Abandonment, that's a big one. Rejection, not feeling accepted, not feeling you're good enough, not feeling like you can do anything right. You're always doing it wrong. A lot of these things actually even come from childhood. Betrayal, there's another wound, a wound on our hearts that when we feel we've been betrayed by a spouse, a friend, a loved person, somebody that is special and meaningful to us, the betrayal brings a wound on our heart. Injustice, when there's injustice around us, it hurts us, it wounds us, it causes us to be so disappointed in people because of their actions and behaviours and choices as well. Karen brought this up about the shame and the humiliation, when things happen in our life that we feel ashamed of, or we feel that we somehow are responsible for. It brings a wound on our heart. And then many childhood experiences, like Karen mentioned about her upbringing. I experienced things, I know many, many people I talk to. We experience things in childhood that can set expectations and set us up believing things about ourselves and what we need to be able to do to be the people that we should be. All of these things, they cause wounding on our heart. And so when we have a wounded heart, we're going to carry some emotions. We're going to carry some thoughts. We're going to carry some desires inside of us that are going to become a filter. Things like anger. Anger will always be a filter. When someone comes and you've experienced betrayal, and then you're betrayed again, you're angry with them, you're angry with yourself, you're angry with the world. And these are the wounds that, until we bring healing and really unpack what's at the root of those things, they will continually just overshadow us and trigger us and have us running around in cycles and patterns that we desperately want to break. But without the skills and the tools and the insight and the understanding needed, we end up just being trapped. Grief. Grief is such a big one. When we've been disappointed, when people have let us down, when we've been rejected, when we've had a loss in our life, that we carry that grief. And while grief is not wrong and anger is not wrong, what's wrong is if it just ends up digging deeper and deeper and becoming the filter through what we see everything through. We sometimes can misinterpret what people are meaning or doing or saying to us because of these wounds on our heart. Rejection, that's a real big one. When we've experienced rejection in our life, feeling comfortable to embrace new friendships, feeling comfortable to do new things, can be super scary. Betrayal, big one, especially these days. The betrayal of a spouse, betrayal of a friend. These bring deep wounds. They cut deep. And like Karen talked about her surgeries that she experienced, the surgery that was urgent and suddenly she had to be ripped open and it wasn't as strategic and as carefully planned. That can actually bring a lot of scars with the whole wound that's sitting there. I love the way that Karen shared about being strategic about the wound, being strategic about the way that you're going to bring healing to that. If we have the choice, which obviously she didn't, in an urgent and an emergency surgery, what would you choose? You want to be ripped open and have more scars, or take some strategic action? Disappointment, another wound that sits on our heart. When we've been let down, maybe we've had expectations of a job or a friendship or a role in our life, wanting to be a mother, and it hasn't worked out for us. The disappointment is a wound that sits on our heart. And if we leave it there, it's just going to fester and get bigger and bigger. These wounds don't suddenly just fade away. You hear the saying, time heals. Well, no, time doesn't really heal. Time just separates you from the pain, from the intensity. It just creates a gap, but it doesn't actually heal. It just create some space, so maybe you don't feel quite as intense about it as you did when that incident happened. But disappointment is such a big one. Shame, another really big one, that when things happen to us, when particularly sexual abuse, there can be a lot of shame, and we just think it was our fault. We think we did something to attract that. And we have abusers and violators who try and tell us and make us believe that. So there's a lot of lies that can sit on our wounds that end up becoming, they just totally defile us and stop us from being who we should be. Self-hatred, that was one that Karen touched on as well, that loving yourself, loving yourself and loving who you are and embracing that, taking care of yourself, taking care of your body and your emotions and your heart. These are really important things that we've got to get to the root. We've got to get down to the real root of the issue. When you've got a wounded heart, I love this picture because I just thought this is what I did. You try and put it in a bubble and you try and protect yourself so that, you don't talk to this person because they might hurt you, and you don't go there, and you start to be restricted. You limit your life because your heart is so soft, so fragile, so broken, so wounded, so much pain there. And you end up stopping yourself and limiting yourself from being all that you truly, truly can be. And while it might feel safe in that bubble, you're missing out on so much more that you can explore and experience. And hungry, deep down, we're hungry to be free. We're hungry to get out of that bubble and not have to be so protective of ourselves and protective of our relationships. So the wounded heart, we have a choice to stay in this bubble or to do something different. And the beautiful thing I want you to know today is your past does not have to be reflected in your future. Your past does not have to define who you are today. Your past does not have to shape you and mold you and make you into something that you're not. You can change your past. And so changing your past means doing something different. You can change your past in that you can bring healing into that past wound. You can bring healing into that place. So while that may not change what happened to you, and what happened to you is not your fault. Many times the things that happen to us are not our fault, but it is our responsibility. We have the responsibility to do something about what's happened in our past. So changing your past means doing something different from what you've been doing. And if your heart is in a bubble and you're protecting yourself and trying to manage it and control it, Karen spoke quite a lot about that. As mothers particularly, we can definitely think that if we just control everything, it's going to be okay. And then we discover actually, no, that hasn't worked. So what happens to you? Very, very often, it's not your fault, but you can take action. You can actually make a choice. And I loved how Karen used that word, I chose. What we do with our past and what we do with the wounds and what we do with the pain, then that's something we can change. And so while we can't change what's happened to us, we can change how we are filtering, how we are perceiving, how we are living our life, instead of through the pain, through a healed and whole space. So I just want to really encourage you, don't waste another week, don't waste another thing, a month or another year, thinking, I can't, what do I do? How do I do it? Start working on this heart healing journey. It's going to silence the voices inside of you that are screaming out and saying, you're just not worth anything. Who do you think you are? You're just this or you're just that. And these voices, they're lies. They're not truth. They're not truth about who you truly, truly are. We all have the right to be valued, treasured, and loved for who we are, to be embraced into that whole place. But there's not always places in our life right now that are going to facilitate and support that. So seek them out. Break the patterns, break the cycles, create new pathways so that you can be the beautiful you that you were intended to be. Beautiful on the inside and the out. We can spend so much time and money on the outside, thinking if we just make the outside look amazing, no one will know what's going on in the inside. But the truth is, eventually, what's on the inside is going to come out on the outside. and we cannot bury it for as long as we think it's not sustainable. It's like living in a survival pattern, and eventually we just run out of energy for that. So, when we are tired, when we're weary, when we feel like we just don't have the energy to go on, then it could well be that you're in this protective mode with your heart, and it's taking too much of your effort to stay in that space. So, some point someone's going to come and pop the bubble and it could unravel. It did for me. It didn't feel very pretty. But as I embraced the journey, I'm so, so grateful. As I embraced that heart healing journey, I was able to see my heart start to be healed and restored and brought into a place that honestly I never believed would have been possible. I really thought that it was my lot to just be stuck in this place of pain and wounding, and until I was confronted in a very powerful way with the heart healing journey, it wasn't until that moment that I thought, I've got to do something different. I've got to step out of this bubble. And it's scary. It can be very scary, because as you step out of that dark place into the light shines and radiates onto the things that need to come to the surface, that need to be brought out into the open, not for the whole world to see, mind you, just for you to see. And very often we even deep down kind of really know what some of those things are, but it's a journey that if we cannot do it on our own, then reach out and do it with someone, and get some support, get some help. So for me, in my passion at Redemption Mamas is to see women redeem what's been lost, to see women redeem what has been stolen from their life, particularly when there's been childhood and abusive things happen in lives. It's something that takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to break through, step out of, and it impacts the rest of our life, whether we like it or not. There is a shadow, like those dark spots on our hearts. There's a shadow on our heart that needs healing, that needs that healing touch. And so what I do is I take people through a journey. It's Spirit-led, Holy Spirit-led, intuitive heart healing. It's not me telling what you need, but it's you hearing for yourself, because our spirit man, our spirit sits down deep within us, right in the guts of who we are. And it's always speaking, but it has a very still, small voice. It doesn't shout like a megaphone. It has a still, small voice, a very quiet voice that if we stop and we're still, we'll hear. But if we keep ourselves busy, trying to not face what we need to face, trying to keep ourselves distracted, then that's going to cause us to be exhausted. It's going to cause us to be frustrated, and we're not going to get the freedom in our life that we're looking for. Life doesn't suddenly just get airy-fairy and no issues, when you go through the heart healing and you start a heart healing journey. There's never going to be a point in our life where there's nothing that comes up. We get triggered by nothing. We're like onions, and we've got to peel away layer by layer by layer. And so as I started this heart healing journey, I was just staggered by the gentleness of the Holy Spirit. He's such a gentleman. He doesn't just rip you open like the medical did for Karen, ripped her open, said, got to save this woman's life. We're just going to do what it takes. And as she said, don't let it get to that point. Don't let it get to the point where you're just, the only way you're going to get better is, for someone to rip you open and revive you. This heart healing journey is gentle. It's sweet. It's very soft, and it's at your pace, at your speed, at the stage and place that your heart is ready to step into it. There's not going to be any ripping out from the guts with the way that I work and the way that the Holy Spirit works. So in the heart healing journey, I offer heart encounters. Heart encounters are about an hour and a half. I set out a 2-hour block so that I would never want to tell someone, oh, sorry, time's up. You'll just have to go figure the rest out yourself. Once we start, we go through and we finish that piece. And the beautiful thing is that it's a little bit by little bit by little bit, as much as each one is ready and willing and wanting in that moment. So it's a gentle, sweet, special time of revelation, of revealing, of connecting with what's in our heart. And you might listen to this list that I shared before, which was about 10 different things, and think, my gosh, I've got all of those. How do you do that in one session? Well, you don't. But you learn principles, you learn powerful principles along the way that you can apply to your own journey down the line. So while there might be a series of times to really dive deep, what I want to create here at Redemption Mamas is a space and a place where women can come and trust the process, come and trust each other, to support and encourage each other. Because like Karen was saying, you cannot do this alone. It's just a horribly lonely way. But apart from being lonely, it's just disabling, because we don't have all the answers within ourselves. We don't have everything we need to know in ourselves. But we do, in community, have a beautiful way that we connect and that we can encourage and we can support. And so once you have been part of my process, you can come into a group where there's women that understand, that know and want and are hungry for the same things, that we are really there to support each other. And so I call that my Soul Sisters group. It's for women who are journeying with me, journeying with each other. And I'm so blessed to have many, many people that have connected with me and that I've connected with, that I find tremendous support from. I can't do this on my own. I'm just so encouraged in this season of my life that people are wanting to jump on and be a part of this process as well. So I trust that this has triggered some thinking, like maybe scratched a little bit of a thought, especially if you've been thinking, I'm stuck and this is it. I'm stuck here for the rest of my life. That is just not the truth. So I want you to take care. I want you to take some self-care. Go and do something for yourself. Look after yourself. And while we can do that, sometimes we can actually tip over into just being selfish, but you need to have wisdom to know where you are being selfish. And if you are being selfish, you could be in that bubble just trying to protect yourself. And if you need self-care to such a point that that's all you can think of, I've just got to go here and I've got to go there and I've got to get this and I've got to do that. Any got-tos, any drivers that are driving you, stop and listen. And it's just not necessarily the truth. There might be something in your heart. Your heart needs some healing. So I just encourage, and I want to really exhort and encourage and challenge you to think, is this something that might be beneficial to me? And I have a little action sheet that I share with people, and I'll share it in the comments of this live, that you can actually get a little sense for yourself. Is this something that might help me? Would a heart encounter, would heart healing be beneficial for me? So I'll put that in the comments in the description as well. Well, take care. Thanks for listening. God bless you. And I'll see you next